The reason why I'm belaboring this so much is that we can actually, though, take this and do a create reference copy. And over here, we can say, essentially, take those spectra, and we're going to add them to this. In the same way that we had the one spectra that passed through the two different masks before, or we had the two different spectra with their own mask before, and they're ultimately additive, we can take the outputs of these and add them together. So now we're going to have even more. We're going to have 4. We just had 2. Now we have 4. 4 groups of 3 of these packages each. And the reason why I'm doing that is I'm going to say on this one, don't actually suppress it the same way. Suppress it pretty much everywhere except for a little bit of it, and take the spectrum here where we say filter below resolution down to 6. What does that mean? I just said a lot at you, and I'm sorry, it's fairly complicated. What we're saying here is these spectra, the ones that we've been used to dealing with, don't modify them in any way. Just take the ones we've been used to and suppress them, where we've been suppressing them. That's easy enough to understand. So what are we doing with this one? With this one, we're going to say, take these spectra again, but filter out all of the big waves. So take the spectra we're used to, only give me the small little waves on the surface, and add them back into this. Not in the same places, though. Let's invert our velocity range here, like so. Let's invert our bounding box here. And let's, do I want to invert the bounding box? I want to invert the bounding box, but do a maximum. And now I end up with a different kind of mask, which is essentially saying suppress everything except for this little transitional area. The transitional area is coming from the fact that the height range is still the same here. So suppress everything. If I suppressed literally everything, like if this was all red, it would add no small little waves back to this whole thing. But because I'm leaving just this little bit of area here, it's going to start from here, where it's suppressing everything but the sim, but then this is going to say, actually, in these areas, add some little waves back on. So, not a huge deal. Just a little bit of extra stuff to make your sim look a little bit better. Let's see if we can visualize this. Ocean evaluate on this. And if we look at it, turn it on and off, it's working. You can see clearly that the geometry is not moving, where it's in motion, but it's still deforming the waves. Again, this will actually happen at render time. But what did I just do here? You can see now, I'm just adding a little bit of extra waviness. I mean, it's hard here because the resolution is fairly low, but in those extra areas, I'm actually putting some of the wave-like patterns back onto the simmed areas. I can't put big drastic waves onto the sim areas, but I can get away with little waves. And remember, I'm getting little waves because I'm filtering below resolution. If you recall, the higher this went, that's where the little waves lived. So I'm saying filter below the high values. I hope that makes sense. It may not. Honestly, if you didn't do any of this extra part, it probably wouldn't really matter. You could just get away with this and we just wouldn't have our little waves in those areas. But it's a fairly standard workflow, so I think it's worth trying to wrap your head around if possible. I just think it's interesting anyway. So again, ocean evaluate is just being used to visualize, as is this. These are real though. The outputs here are the masks and the spectra. So just like before, we need to split out. So go back to your ocean setup. This split thing and also the caches, they're moving to a new home. Cut them out of there, paste them into here. So this is still splitting the spectra out into this one, but now the masks that are going into this one need to be saved per frame, because obviously the sim is generating different masks per frame. So put a $OS, put the $F in here, and just change this back to regular frame range, and change this to revert to default so it's doing the full frame range. Our fetches over here need to be updated to point to these, because it won't know that we moved them. So I'm going to go here and say in the out ocean splash, point to the spectrum, and for the masks, point to the masks, like so. Save it. And actually, let's resave the spectrum here. It needs to run it through that masking node first. That's okay, it shouldn't take too long. Particle fluid mask, okay. Took longer than I thought, but there you go. It's done now. And the masks, I don't want to run the full frame range at this very, very moment. So I'm gonna say save current frame, save to disk, and now I'm gonna go back to save frame range, just so I don't forget to do it. So after all that, we need to go to our materials area, and the ocean surface displacement needs to point to our spectrum here. So drag that in there and drag this one into here. Fortunately, we won't have to do any more of this in our lesson where we actually change where things look and change where things are cached. That's the only time that's going to happen. But now that we did all that, save your file, and I'm going to render this now, and hopefully this all will look the same, but the splash will look a little bit different. You know, we had a preview already what it's going to look like with our ocean evaluate, so we can be pretty sure that it's going to be right. But nonetheless, let's just confirm to ourselves here. Okay, so sure enough, we can see that the splash looks different now. And we can even kind of intuitively feel that it looks better. It's got this kind of more smoother wash here. So, and everything else looks the same. So good. So that seems to have worked. All of our material and cache updating stuff. And to reward ourselves, we can now wait for all the masks to be calculated. They're going to take a little while, so let's click on it and run away.